Welcome back to the Women's Lounge, where all issues are women's issues, where we talk about politics, we talk about culture, music. Nothing is off the table. I'm your host, Emiliana Guereca, and today we're asking and we're talking about the cost of looking away. And when we say looking away, we talk about making sure that we highlight what is happening, that looking away isn't going to make things go away. So let's be honest, our news cycle is chaotic. The noise is constant. And yet the most urgent issues for women, for our democracy, for society, for our safety are slowly starting to slip out of focus. So that's what we're tackling today in the Women's Lounge. We want to make sure that we have everyone's voice. Everyone is part of the solution with what is going on. So today we're going to talk about a few things, but let's get into our Women's Rights Watch. So today, Women's Rights Watch, we're back to reproductive justice and back to reproductive access, because with the big, beautiful bill, which is really an ugly bill, what has been happening quietly is that Medicaid is defunding Planned Parenthood clinics. So women's reproductive clinics are set to close across multiple states, across the country. It is said that over 200 Planned Parenthood clinics will close. And let's be real, Planned Parenthood has been the backbone of reproductive health for millions, including myself, and it's being gutted, systematically being defunded, targeted with lawsuits and legislated out of existence. And I do know that between Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and a lot of abortion access organizations are fighting back. But let's be real. It isn't just about abortion. It's about controlling women, because the clinics where women, especially low-income women, exist, they get cancer screenings, birth control, basic health care. So when they vanish, it's more than just abortion. We are losing access to health care for women, the most vulnerable women. So the real question is, why isn't this a leading story in the nightly news? Why is this treated like a side story instead of a national emergency? We are talking about healthcare for millions, and yet it's not being mentioned. It's a side thing. We know that Planned Parenthood in many communities is the only access to healthcare for women. I know growing up, my mom would go to Planned Parenthood for birth control, for pap smear, for cancer screenings. So I think in the bigger picture, we are really losing access to healthcare. And I think that we need to talk more about that and what has happened with the big ugly bill, as we call it. All right. Whew, take a deep breath. We're going to move into what is happening with political violence. What happened last week is that the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking at a university. It was honestly awful. I personally had no idea who he was, and I know that most people knew he was around conservative circles, but it wasn't until I saw the wave of responses that you knew how much influence he had. But more than that, whether you agreed with him or not, the fact that political violence is at our doorstep is not okay, right? It's in the room with us. The young man that opened fire was 22 years old. Honestly, their lives are over. The FBI states that he acted alone, but we're told that they couldn't track him. They couldn't anticipate this. At one point, they arrested an older gentleman. So I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling too safe. I don't feel safe under the current administration. If the FBI couldn't find a 22-year-old who they say acted alone, what's the state of our democracy, right? What's the state of the political violence that we're in? Because let's talk about that this is not an isolated case. Let's talk about folks showing up to burn Shapiro's house. Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi's husband and the violence he experienced. Let's talk about Gretchen Whitmer and how there was a plan to kidnap her. And so the violence around politics is not new, but it's escalating. And so I want us all to take a step back and think about what that does for democracy. So no one, to be clear, no one should be celebrating anyone's death, no matter what party. And then let's remind ourselves that a congresswoman was killed a few months ago in the Midwest as well. So this isn't new, but we cannot normalize it. We should not be normalizing political violence, because just like we say that Charlie Kirk is a political activist, well, guess what? We're considered activists. And so I do think that there's a time to step back and say, okay, we need to make sure that we protect free speech, and we need to make sure that it's not marred by violence. We need to make sure that free speech is protected. All right, we're going to move into the other stories that are buried stories, as we say in the media. And what we're talking about is the stories that are slipping through the cracks, that there is so much more chaos that we don't hear about other stories. For example, where are the Epstein files? We still need to see them. They're still sealed, still not released. So why and who are they protecting is the big question, right? So there we are. The also piece we're not really talking about this week is something that was always out there for President Biden. And it was his age, and it was at one point he was called Sleepy Joe. And currently we have a president who will be the oldest president in history to be in office at the end of his term. But the president seems incapacitated with fewer and fewer public appearances. So it's raising questions about who's actually governing, right? Who's actually running all of this when we talk about the ICE raids that have been deployed in Chicago, when we talk about the military deployed across the country. And of course, when we talk about the unemployment rates, who is running all of this, right? Is it the Stephen Millers? Is it, I know Kash Patel's FBI, right? So realistically, the stories that are slipping through the cracks are the stories that are important to society, regardless of your party. So that's what we want to talk about. And these aren't conspiracy theories. We're not getting into conspiracy theories. These are realities. And yet they are buried. They're just sound bites and spin. And no one is talking about how we get out of this muck. How do we stabilize? How do we help heal the communities that are hurting the most? And so I do think that there's room for discourse. There's room for us to talk about what is happening on the ground. I read an article about the folks in Chicago understanding and knowing their rights. And surprise, Los Angeles has already gone through all of that. We understand and know that ICE is not following the rules. It's not following protocol. It does not have warrants. It's really lawless out there. And so when the media says this is what should be happening, what they're not reporting is that Los Angeles has already been through this. What they're not reporting is that DC has already had a military force, right? So the big question for me, and it's what we should all be asking, is how did we get here? How did we get to a place where reproductive rights are erased, where women's bodies are controlled, where political violence is normalized? How did we get here? And how did we get to a place where it feels like leadership is absent? It feels like we don't have leadership currently in this country. That's what it feels like. So I don't have all the answers. I personally think we are the leaders we've been looking for. And I think that we say that, but really when you think about it, we are. So I don't know about you. What I do know is that silence for me, silence isn't an option. It just isn't. So pretending that everything is normal makes us complicit. Pretending that everything will work out is not normal. So I think we need to continue to stand up. We need to continue to advocate and truly make sure that everyone's stories are out there. We've got to document this. I don't want to be 80 and then say, what was I doing at this time? Was I hiding? Was I speaking out? I would choose the speaking out and making sure that we talk about what is not being talked about, right? So today we're talking about the clinics closing, the violence is escalating, and we're making sure that the truth is not buried, but also having the conversations around what is happening and talking to our neighbors, talking to our kids to make sure that they understand that this is not normal. I don't know about you, but I'm over the breaking news. I think what is breaking now, right? That's the thought I have when I see breaking news on my phone or on the computer. What is breaking now? And realistically, we are in a fragile state around political violence. We're in a fragile state around ICE detention and women's rights. But what it should not be a fragile state is our resolve to make sure and remind you that we are the leaders we've been waiting for, that we are the resistance. We are the storytellers, and we are the ones who keep the light on when institutions try to dim it. So we've got to make sure that we continue to do that. If you're listening today and you're part of this conversation, share this episode. Talk about it at the dinner table, at work, organize in your community, share, like, subscribe, because we cannot afford to stay silent. And again, we are not advocating political violence. We are advocating dissent, and we are advocating to continue to stay loud and to make sure that you get to tell your story. So thank you for joining me today on the Women's Lounge. In the Women's Lounge. I'm Emiliana, and I will see you next week. Same place, same energy, same fire. Stay focused, stay loud, stay activist. Same place at the Women's Lounge. It's Wednesday. See you next week.